The demise of Rome, this period of foreshadowing before the European Middle Ages, is like an epic. When it comes to how this great civilization died, many people will attribute the problem to these guys. Oh, sorry, these guys. In the eyes of many people, the reason for the death of the Roman Empire was simply that his opponent was too powerful. The demise of Rome was the result of a combination of many reasons, but we can be sure that the Roman Empire at the time of its demise in 476 AD must not have been the Roman Empire that dominated the Mediterranean in the 1st century. They were separated for centuries. It is hard to say that they are still a same country. The study of Rome at the economic level is a very interesting process. For many people, it seems that the moment Rome died, the Middle Ages began. It was as if manners, serfs, knights, witches and kings all popped up in an instant. But these things in historical stories must have their economic basis, otherwise how could they exist? Similarly, the demise of Rome must be absolutely related to its economy. Today, we will discuss the economic reasons for the demise of Rome. Before proceeding, we must define the nature of the Roman Empire. There is no doubt that the Roman Empire, like the Byzantine Empire, was a centralized state. Unlike the kingdoms under the enfeoffment system in the Middle Ages, the Roman Empire had its own unified government, with officials representing the central government in the provinces, a national army, and even benefits and subsidies for specific groups of people. Then, the demise of the empire must be caused by the collapse of its administrative system. After all, it is difficult for you to call a divided country an empire. At present, the standard period for the transition from prosperity to decline of the Roman Empire, recognized by historians, is the crisis of the 3rd century. The crisis in the 3rd century has several manifestations, namely, the drying up of rural areas, the decline of cities, continuous civil wars, and the complete paralysis of the imperial government. Among them, we study the economic reasons for this urban decline and rural decline. So next, I will talk about the definitions, please remember, because this is the core content of this video. First, for the central government, cities are very important, because they provide most of the taxes and soldiers, and the government's management costs are lower. Second, cities are built on the basis of sufficient food and raw materials provided by the countryside. For cities, the more raw materials, population and food provided by the countryside, the faster the city will develop. Conversely, if the countryside no longer provides enough people and food, the cities must decline. Therefore, we can draw a conclusion based on this basic logic, combined with the large-scale urban decline of the Roman Empire in the 3rd century. Something must have changed the countryside, so that it can no longer provide enough people and food. If we want to conduct our first research, our research must start with the most common consumer group at that time. That is, the common people at the grassroots level would like to live in the countryside or in the city. As a consumer, there seems to be little difference between the products obtained in urban and rural areas. They are mainly food, clothing, and water. At the same time, in an era when the concept of public health has not been formed, it is very dangerous to gather a large number of people to gather things, and the developed trade in the town makes it easier for the government to collect taxes. Presumably you must have read about the viciousness of Roman tax officials in the Bible, right? To make matters worse, the government could use financial means to plunder the wealth of the society. This situation was not uncommon in 3rd century Rome, mainly reflected in the devaluation of currency. However, although the city is a commercially developed area, the city is not always friendly to grassroots consumers. You may eat a few more foods, because of the abundance of market products. But don't forget that the government will charge merchants tariffs, so the price of food can be several times more expensive than what you grow yourself, and there is no guarantee of freshness or quality. In an era when the vast majority of people can only guarantee their survival, the same consumption can not only be provided by the countryside, but also be better and cheaper than the cities. After all, the prices of silk and spices have nothing to do with the poor. So for lower-level consumers, the city has never been more attractive than the countryside under the same standard of living. but living in the countryside and owning your own land is kind of a luxury. The Roman yeoman is a vulnerable group. During the period of the Roman Republic, the Roman government was already worried about the property of the yeoman, because of the land annexation carried out by the nobles. A large number of yeoman farmers went bankrupt. At that time, the Roman army was composed of citizens with property, and citizens needed to pay for their own weapons and equipment. Gaius Marius' reforms finally gave birth to the Roman legion, turning compulsory military service into recruiting military service. A large part of the reason was that there were not enough yeoman farmers in Rome, who could afford to pay for equipment, which is enough to illustrate the severity of land annexation. In the early 1st and 2nd centuries, the mode of land annexation was mainly slavery manners, because slaves had no consumption capacity, and their products were mainly supplied to cities, but the products of owner farmers were mostly used for their own consumption. A large number of self-cultivating farmers went bankrupt and entered the city, while the rapid development of slavery manners in the countryside led to the export of a large amount of surplus goods to the city. The reason was that slave labor was relatively cheap at that time. After the big manor owners merged the land, they could use slaves for labor. The relative abundance of a large amount of land and labor could allow them to produce scale effects and improve the quality and quantity of products. After sufficient raw materials and cheap food were imported into the city, it brought about the development of the city, but in the late 2nd century, the situation changed. The beginning of the butterfly effect of the collapse of the Roman Empire originated from the increase in the price of slaves. Slavery manners were the main form of agriculture and raw material production within the empire. These production that relied heavily on slaves responded extremely violently to slave prices. Even a 10% increase in the price of slaves would seriously impact the profits of these industries. But as I mentioned earlier, the land annexation of the empire has never stopped. In the middle age of the empire,
Surprise,
even the army joined the process of annexation. From this perspective, the empire's labor supply chain in terms of raw material production is single and weak. The fact is that the skyrocketing price of slaves quickly led to expensive agricultural products. The slave masters in turn forced the slaves to work harder, to make up for the shortage caused by the loss of labor, but this led to the slaves' resistance instead. A large number of slaves damaged production tools, went on strike, fled and even revolted, which had a serious impact on Rome's political situation, but more importantly, the shortage of raw materials and food caused Rome's city to decline. And this was just a troublesome thing start. In the next video, we will tell how Rome changed its economic structure, and how this change completely destroyed the Roman Empire.